we don't need this talk. Okay. So again, before we start, it's a group discussion, right? Every week, I don't know anything. So if you guys catch me in a lie, don't say anything. Okay, chapter 10, modules. So there's a description of a big ball of mud, right? How many of you guys have written a program or have gone into a project and you're trying to build something out, but then you start seeing that you're either repeating code or you can't figure where things are at? I think that's most of the time, right? So the book talks about a big ball of mud. It's often used for large structuralist programs. Everything sticks together, and when you try to pick out a piece, the whole thing just comes apart, right? So here's a chart. You guys can get a better idea.
Is this like a serious chart, or is this like a sarcastic chart?
It's a sarcastic chart.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't make it. It's online. But the point is that everything, you see, it's all over the place. There's no real structure to it, right? So as soon as you take one part out, you don't know if it breaks something else, right? Does that make sense? Okay. So the whole chapter talks about modules, packages, and some package managers, right? So for example, modules, a module is a piece of the program that specifies which other pieces it relies on and which functionality it provides for other modules to use. It's an interface, right? How many of you guys were here for the talk about objects? Okay, so in JavaScript, objects have all these different properties that are available and publicly accessible, right? So a module has the same idea. You can access different aspects of the module, and then most of it's abstracted, so you don't see it, right? There's things you don't have to see to know how they work. So, okay, perfect. So module interfaces have a lot in common with object interfaces. They make part of the module available to the outside world and keep the rest private. By restricting the ways in which modules interact with each other, the system becomes more like Lego, where pieces interact through well-defined connectors and less like mud, where everything just mixes with everything. Does that make sense? Okay, so there's only one way to play with Legos, right? Unless you guys have found another way, I'd be more than happy to listen to you guys. Okay, cool. How many of you guys have heard about dependencies? Right? How many of you guys work with NPM, for example? Okay, perfect. So you guys know you have a package.json file and you load like 1,000 dependencies when you're loading the project? Yeah. Even if it's a to-do app? Okay, perfect. So the relations between modules are called dependencies. When a module needs a pizza from another, a pizza. I just said pizza. Why did I get that in my head? Okay, perfect. When a module needs a piece from another module, it is said to depend on that module. When this fact is clearly specified in the module itself. It can also be used to figure out which other modules need to be present to be able to use a given module to automatically load dependencies. I do have an example of those coming up in a few slides, so it'll make more sense. So approaching this architecture concept, designing a fitting module structure for a program can be difficult. In the phase where you're still exploring the problem, trying different things to see what works, pretty much you're writing spaghetti code when you start writing a program, right? Or how many of you guys right off the bat are doing object-oriented programming or functional programming? One hand? Really, Jason?
Functional.
Jeez, you're gonna have to teach me how to write code. So you're trying different things to see what works. You might want not to worry about it too much since it can be a big distraction. Once you have something that feels solid, then it's a good time to take a step back and organize it. Right? I think that's how most everyone writes code. You kind of make sure you want to build what you need and then you go back and kind of make it look better, right? How many of you guys are familiar with packages? Okay. Again, this talk is almost over, guys. I told you, short talk. It's about modules. There's not much to it. Okay, perfect. So packages. A package is a chunk of code that can be distributed, so copied and installed. It may contain one or more modules and has information about which other packages it depends on. Okay? A package also usually comes with documentation, or we hope that it comes with documentation, explaining what it does so that people who didn't write it might still be able to use it. Okay? What do you think is the benefit of packages? I'm sorry?
Organization.
Okay. Anything else?
Pre-written.
Pre-written, right? So you can just use it and build?
It's easier to see what you need to inherit if you have dependencies amongst different things that are...
So I think the other aspect of it is that you don't have to rewrite that code yourself, right? So you can use something that's pre-built. Somebody already took care of that problem, so you can just reuse it. So one of the ways that JavaScript kind of handles modules is CommonJS. The most widely used approach to bolt-on JavaScript modules is called CommonJS modules. Node.js uses it, and it's the system used by most packages on NPM. Okay? Along with CommonJS, we have what are called ES6 modules, and we'll see them right now. So how does CommonJS work? The main concept in CommonJS modules is a function called require. How many of you guys are familiar with require? Okay, perfect. So all of you guys, great. When you call this with the module name of dependency, it makes sure that the module is loaded and returns this interface. Have you guys tried requiring a package and then you haven't loaded it yet? What does JavaScript do? Oh, a lot of blank faces.
Like module not found?
Right, it gives you an error, right? Well, it's one of the only times where JavaScript actually does its job and tells you, hey, you're not doing something right. So here's an example of require. So that should look familiar to you guys. And then kind of keep this in mind because we will talk about it in a minute.
Do you have to import and run require, or?
No, so we'll talk about import, export. And that's one of the problems we have in JavaScript right now. So module interface. The interface of an ordinal is a single function, right? Whereas date names, exports, and object containing multiple things. Days and months are arrays of names. Restructuring is very convenient when creating bindings for imported interfaces. The module adds this interface function to exports so that modules that depend on it get access to it. Okay, so let's take a look at that. So we saw that package earlier, right? Let me go back. So this is the package that we're talking about, right? We're exporting it. You guys understand that? Okay. So let's take a look.
So exporting makes it viewable outside of the module in other modules?
As the module, yeah.
So it's like saying it's public.
Exactly. So once you require it, you can utilize it,
Gotcha.
right? Now here we're utilizing it by creating a new date, and whatever that sends back, whatever it returns as, gets submitted into the format date function that we just required from that module. Okay, so that's one way to do it. Then we have the ES6 modules. So the JavaScript standard from 2015. First of all, how many of you guys know what ES6 stands for? Okay, perfect. I didn't know, so I'm like, I wonder if somebody does. Okay, perfect. So it is called ES6 ES modules. I'm sorry?
What does ECMA stand for?
It's synonymous with JavaScript, right? Okay, perfect. I almost thought it was a trick question. I'm like,
Yeah.
God damn it, they got me again.
Well,
I should just stay quiet, right?
it's some European standard.
I'm sorry?
I like that.
Some European.
Yeah. It's not very American at all.
Cool. So it is called ES modules, where ES stands for ECMAScript. The main concepts of dependencies and interfaces remain the same, but the details differ. For one thing, the notation is now integrated into the language. So instead of calling a function to access a dependency, we now use import export. Okay? So again, instead of calling a function to access dependency, use a special import keyword. Similarly, the export keyword is used to export things. It may appear in front of a function, class, or binding definition. So, I guess a variable. We've talked about binding before in previous talks, and some of you guys are like, what is that? It's just a variable, right? So defined by let, const, or var. So I don't know if you guys can see this example right here. It's towards the bottom. So you guys can see we're importing, right? How many of you guys have seen that before? Okay, perfect. So we're importing ordinal from the ordinal package, right? Or wherever it's coming from. You guys might see this a lot if you're working with like React, right? Perfect. Okay, so let's do notes. Okay, default export. So to create a default export, you write export default before an expression. A function declaration or a class declaration. How many of you guys have seen this before? Okay, anyone want to kind of tell us what this is useful for? Like when you have just one item in a file, for example?
I'm going to kind of butcher this, but if you are importing from this file, then whatever you set as the default is what it's automatically gonna import. So you can call it whatever you want, like
Right.
you were just saying, import or export default winter, and then you had another file that said import season, then season would be automatically set to winter.
Yeah, so I've seen it also where you kind of export a function that has its own scope, and then has a bunch of different things inside that you can access, right? So that's where it comes as a useful thing. So, but you do see this a lot in React as well. So yeah, I'm not gonna read this. So, because I read this thing and I found it interesting because I didn't understand the whole idea as to why there were two different ways of doing things. But apparently it's a problem. It's not really a feature of JavaScript. So we have the way where we can require things, and then there's the way we can import things, right? So that we have two separate ways of doing things. The problem is that we haven't adopted one completely. So we still have two ways of doing things, and we have to support both ways of doing things. So again, it's not that we have two ways of doing things just because we want there to be two ways. It's because we haven't phased one out yet, right? So you would think that they would go with import export because it's part of the language now, right? But that hasn't been the case. So okay, so we're almost done with the modules part. How many of you guys are familiar with bundling? So there's bundling, minifying, and so on. A lot of these things were useful in their time, but once we get to HTTP 2, you'll see that they become kind of not useless, but useless. So bundling. So because fetching a single big file tends to be faster than fetching a lot of tiny ones, web programmers have started using tools that roll their programs, which they built into modules, back into a single big file before they publish it to the web. So such tools are called bundlers. Any of you guys have an example of a bundler?
Webpack.
Webpack? Okay, perfect. Yeah, I won't even ask for more. That's the most important one. So minifying. How many of you guys are familiar with minifying? Perfect. So the size of files also determines how fast they can be transferred over the network. Thus, JavaScript community has invented minifiers. These take a JavaScript program and make it smaller by removing comments, white space, renaming things to like one-letter names. Google loves to do that. I thought that's how the program was coded. I'm like, yeah, I'm never going to make it there. And replacing pieces of code with equivalent code that take up less space. Now, here comes HTTP 2. Okay? Again, I think I asked you guys if you were familiar with HTTP 2, right? So this is something that you implement on the server, depending on what HTTP server you're using, right? I'm most familiar with Nginx, and it takes literally just one parameter, you place it in there in your server scope, and you're set, right? But we're gonna go over the benefits of what this does, and hopefully if you guys have any servers yourselves that are hosted or managed by a host company or whatever, you can tell them to upgrade you, right? And benefit from these items. So we talked about in the modules chapter that, is that me? That's not me. That's best practice to kind of minify everything, bundle everything, so there's only one file. But for example, we're getting to this now. HTTP 2 is the latest update to the HTTP protocol by the very long name IETF. The protocol is the successor to HTTP 1, which was drafted in '99. HTTP 2 is a huge upgrade. It comes with a lot of benefits, especially for us as developers. So the update brings with its advancements in efficiency, security, and speed. Most importantly, speed. It affects everything from user experience to even SEO. So it's wonderful. So it comes from Google's protocol project called, I want to say Speedy. I don't know what that would translate to you guys, but it was based largely on Google's own protocol, again, Speedy, which was deprecated in 2016. The protocol had many of the same features found in HTTP 2 and managed to improve data transmissions while keeping backwards compatibility, which is very important because you don't want to add HTTP 2 to your server and then everything else breaks, right? So here are the benefits of using HTTP 2. So in some projects with HTTP, you have projects opening up to 6 connections, right, to get all the requests for an app. So here, only one connection to the server is used to load a website. And that connection remains open as long as the website is open. This reduces the number of round trips needed to set up multiple TCP connections. Now this one has a really fancy name. It's very simple. multiplexing. It just means that you're allowed multiple requests on that same connection, right? So instead of asking for the CSS file and then waiting, and then asking for the JavaScript file and then waiting, you ask for them and they come back, right? And you receive them in the order they come in, right? Does that make sense?
Is that automated, other than changing a server-side parameter?
That's, yeah,
Just
it
happens.
does it for you, yeah. So that's the beauty of it, right? As a developer, you just say, hey, host, like, update this, or if you are managing your own server, you update it and everything else is done for you, so. And again, so previously with HTTP, each transfer would have to wait for other transfers to complete, right? So in JavaScript, we kind of know that process to be, what, synchronous, right? And the other one being asynchronous, perfect. So binary. So it makes HTTP easier for a server to parse, more compact and less error prone. No additional time is wasted translating information from text to binary, which is the computer's native language, right? You also have the option of setting which file should be served up first. I'm not aware of how to do that in HTTP 1, but with HTTP 2, you have that option, right? Server push is another cool feature. Additional resources can be sent to a client for future use. So after everything's been loaded, there are still other files you can send if that website needs it, right? It would be very specific to a project. It's not something that's needed by all projects.
So is this related to like WebSockets and server-side and that kind of stuff? Or is
No,
it-
it's just the protocol. Yeah. And then lastly, H-pack compression, which benefits from the binary benefit that we talked about. HTTP 1 transmits server requests and responses in plain text, leading to a lot of excess data being transferred. HTTP 2 reduces that amount of data by transmitted in binary. So for example, headers are much smaller, so there's less time spent, in getting those, right? Does that make sense?
So does that mean it compresses it down, so it compresses it basically down to like a zip or a binary blob?
Just binary, right? So we don't have that excess data in the header, right?
So not only can you send more channels at the same time, so
It's faster,
and it's faster because
right?
it's smaller.
Reduce size.
And the
Yep.
browser itself decompresses it? Is that how it
It's read by the client,
is?
right? Yeah. So that's the other thing, that a lot of the clients already support it, so it's a matter of us making the switch. The problem is that, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but there's been a move towards using SSL on our websites, right? So we all want to make them secure, whatever. There's also talk that Google is doing that because for ad purposes, right? It kind of brings everyone out of the game, and they're still there. But for our purposes, it makes everything faster, more secure, and whatnot. So, okay. So some of the things that we can cut out as developers are the following: domain sharding, image sprites. How many of you guys have dealt with image sprites? Right. So you have an image, multiple images on that file, right? And you kind of give it the position to use that image because you don't want to load multiple images, right? No longer do you need that. Combining files, so bundling, you no longer need to do that. Inlining, no longer. Inlining was the process of grabbing all your CSS files, combining them, and then spitting them out inline, right, into your HTML file, right? It looked ugly as hell, but it loaded faster. Cookieless domains and batch requests for APIs. So again, all of this is taken care of by HTTP 2. You no longer need to do it. And then I'm almost done, guys. Server benefits. Many of the deprecated techniques place additional strain on servers. So these were things that we were trying to do to kind of help get faster speed for our users, but they were putting a strain on the server itself, right? It was extra work that the server had to do. So these connection-related techniques are no longer necessary with HTTP 2, and the result is lower bandwidth requirements, less network overhead, and lower server memory usage. So have I sold you guys on this yet? Yes? No? See? Okay, great. Thank you, Vest. That's a record. I haven't heard from you, so. Now, can you guys guess what the benefits are on mobile?
Fewer connections.
Right? So on mobile phones, multiple connections would cause issues with mobile network, cause them to drop packets and resubmit requests. That sucks, right? the additional request is added to the server load. HTTP2 is easier to parse, more compact, and within the listen directory right here, all we do is add HTTP2, right? And then we reload Nginx, and it's working, ready to go, okay? Now for those of you guys that are curious to see which websites are using HTTP2, you're more than welcome to do so. So you can open up, your favorite website or whatever website you want to check, open the network panel, refresh, and then check protocol. If it says H2, they're using HTTP2. Okay? Simple, right? Perfect. I think we got over this one way too fast. Any questions?
So you're saying that with the faster load and everything, it helps with SEO, how?
Okay, so part of SEO is user experience and speed, right? So when I say helps SEO, I say it in the context of the Google search engine, okay? One of the items that they look at is overall speed. Is this loading before, X amount of seconds? That also pertains to user experience. So there's more than just search engines, right? Because if your site is doing fine SEO-wise, but your site is slow, your user doesn't care. 3 seconds in, they're done. They go to another website, right? So I think, in my experience, speed is a very important aspect because it covers a variety of different aspects of it. So user experience, everything, right? So I don't know if that makes any sense. Okay, perfect. Any more questions? Fast? No questions? Oh, okay, perfect. Awesome. Okay, well, if you guys have no more questions, I don't think there's any more pizza though. Yeah, there is some. So you guys can more than welcome to get more drinks. You guys can stay around, network. In the meantime, I'll be looking.
So just out of curiosity, and maybe it doesn't fit into this discussion, but where do server-side events, web sockets, that kind of thing, fit in the stack between HTTP 2 protocol or something like it and your client-side JavaScript?
So that's a wonderful question because next Saturday the chapter deals with all of that.
Oh, okay.
So thank you for asking that question.
You're welcome.
If you guys want to know,
Staging it off.
yeah, if you guys want if you guys want to know the answer to this question, come next Saturday. So perfect. I'll give you your $5 later. Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you.